Do you find yourself swept away by the constant change and turmoil around you? Whether personal or professional, these challenges can keep us from living a life of peace and productivity. I'm Liz Hurl, a licensed clinical marriage and family therapist, and I want to show you data-driven strategies to help bring stability and peace to your life. Welcome to the Anchored in Chaos podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Anchored in Chaos. Mm-hmm. It's this amazing podcast that we started here a little while back.
Modestly.
Hey, I'm your host, Liz Hurl. We decided to do some throw-ins of like who we are again, just in case you are tuning in.
Yeah, if you're new, and yeah, right. That's exactly right. We always want to have people comfortable with who we are and let them know who we are.
Absolutely. So today we're going to talk about a really great topic that I think surrounds us all the time, and that is the desire for control and the dysregulation when it's lost. So we're going to talk about the word dysregulation and what all that means. It's a pretty hot word sometimes people utilize. And we're going to be discussing.
We'll be disgusting, all right. No, we won't.
That's discussing.
Liz has had about 10 cups of coffee before we get started, so
I do apologize in advance.
It's down a little.
So we will be talking about dysregulation and how that can happen when we feel like we're no longer in charge of ourselves, because we struggle with that all the time, like self-control.
Right. Liz, thank you for having me back. I'm Dr. Tim Caldwell. I'll be Liz's co-host on Anchored in Chaos. I'm usually always here. If I'm not, it's probably a chimp or something like that. But I'm always here. I'm kind of her sidekick for this whole gig, but we very much enjoy what we do here. And we're getting better at it. We've talked about this several times, and we encourage other people to talk about this stuff too. But this all has to do very much with self-control, why we feel like we need to have all this self-control and this fantasy that we have control over anything. There are very few things that we really have control over, but this is something we struggle with independently, even in the ventures that we have. And we know everybody at some point in their life will struggle with this type of stuff. So we want to know, why are we so attached to this need for stability and safety through what we think is control? What happens when that control slips away?
Well, it's the feeling of being unmoored, and it can also cause a lot of stress. You want to talk about what unmoored is, Dr. Hubbard?
Oh, Liz throwing in nautical terms. So it means you're unanchored.
Yes.
It actually means that you're unanchored. Yes. You're not tied to something.
Correct. Yeah. Very good. So it is your body and mind showing you like how we feel when something isn't predictable any longer. We start, feeling detached and feeling out
set adrift. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Adrift.
What's going on?
It's, of course, going to affect, I apologize, our mental and physical health.
Yes, absolutely true. I love this topic. I've been an athlete my whole life. I had a long stint on the professional side, which people don't quite understand. I was in the magazines a few times, but most likely you're just making your living as an athlete. Mm-hmm. There has to be some discipline in that. And with that in discipline is a sense of control. So we want to start to look at and explore some of these things. Why do we crave so much control? What's it look like when we have control? And are we really feeling more safe? Is that the idea, just to feel safe?
Yeah, I think that's trying to manage that angst response, anxiety response that we have. Of course, control gives us a sense of security. Like we know what comes next. We are calling all the shots over our life. We really have that belief or idea. We need this control all the time. Like we never want that slipping away from us, because that causes dysregulation.
Right.
So think about how we structure our days.
Are you going to talk about my alarms, Liz?
So how we structure our days in creating meal plans and setting goals and routines. Dr. Caldwell is referring to his annoying, I would say, how many 4 or 5 alarms on his phone a day that he reminds himself to eat, because
it's more. It's okay. It's more.
Ailing mindset. So he has to be reminded in these manners. And so this really does help you stay on track and maintain your eating regimen. So in all seriousness, it is about how we maintain our routines that gives us a sense of control, of predictability. I know what comes next. And sometimes we have reminders, which in all fairness to Dr. Caldwell is not a terrible thing.
but it does help keep us on track with our goals and what we expect. But one thing we have to realize is life is unpredictable. There is no sure plan that's going to happen. So when things don't go according to plan, what happens?
Well, that's a good point. I would say I think, much like dogs are happier when they have discipline and routine. They understand the parameters of where they need to operate. I think it keeps them healthier mentally, probably physically too. But again, I always want to put forth the idea is it's one thing to have control, but that can be excessive too, right? Mm-hmm. We want control so that we can not just survive, but thrive. But what happens when things go wrong? Mm-hmm. And that's where we need to decide, or at least discuss, when things do go wrong, what happens when we lose that attachment to our safety, our own
stability?
Safety and stability. And where's our confidence? Where'd our confidence go?
So there's that drive that you talk about, like we're on the road of life, and then you meet a bump that turns into a pothole.
We talk about that is, what's that like when you're cruising along just fine and then the wheels fall off? What's that like? And we always want to talk about how tricky that is to navigate, stuff like that.
So when we talk about what happens in dysregulation in ourselves, what the big word dysregulation means, and it's just the acknowledgement of what is happening in your mind and body, physical, mental reaction. What are your thoughts? What are you thinking about? And those thoughts, of course, will fuel and drive other parts of you, increase your heart rate. You can begin to perspire. And one thing that I was sharing with you earlier, and that is we have began to overutilize the use of the word anxiety in a way of, oh my goodness, that really made me anxious, versus that really kind of stressed me out or kind of made me worried, because life is full of anxieties. And
it should be.
Yeah.
It should be.
Right. And the understanding of when you are no longer able to manage that, like you have to identify, be aware. So for instance, I have a little story I'll share. A few weekends ago, I took my daughter bowling. And it was just she and I began to start bowling. I could feel I was kind of having this, I don't know, internal freak out moment. We could use that hot word, dysregulation. I felt like my chest was getting warm and tingly, and I started kind of being like, what? But I immediately went into...
In fairness, you could recognize that because you have a fear of public speaking.
Right.
Man, that's top of the list in society, is one of the main things is public speaking.
Yeah, and everyone's like, you have a podcast, right?
So
I'm like, just the camera and me and
you are
microphone.
accustomed to what this feels like when it's coming on.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we're talking about here, is recognizing when dysregulation happens within your mind and your body. I immediately began to be perplexed, like, what's going on with you, Liz? Like, you're literally just going up to the alley to throw this ball down and have a good time. And then my check-in with self, I kind of was like, all right, this is ridiculous. I was able to kind of regulate myself, and then I broke out some amazing dance moves that you all missed out on. So,
yeah. But anyway, they cleared the bowling alley, and SWAT was called in. She was sedated. But
listen, the Running Man is still popular.
It is. So tell me more.
So when we're talking about dysregulation, part of us, when our nervous system goes into overdrive, which is what I was just sharing.
Right. So let's talk biology. Let's talk biochemistry. Let's break our systems down as the human animal into two separate parts. Sympathetic, parasympathetic. Sympathetic being fight or flight. Am I going to have to fight for my life, fight for my meal, do some type of thing that will really cause me harm or great pain, or the idea that it would? Or is it going to be parasympathetic, where I have a full belly, I have a safe place to sleep, I have a warm fire, those things that help us slow down, relax, sleep, recover. Well, when we get overstressed, overstimulated, dysregulated, as you say, our sympathetic can just jump off the charts. And now we have got to do the very best we can in our own way to try to bring that back down and find balance, so that we can get back to the point where we are a healthier animal, and that we're not just literally in overdrive with this anxious biochemical reaction that's going on in your body, where your organs are working, your eyes are working, everything's working overtime, and it will literally burn you up.
Correct. Yeah. So what you're talking about there is the fight or flight part.
That's correct.
Our heart rate increases, like I was sharing. Our breath can become shallow. Our stress levels rise. And this is also a chemical imbalance that starts happening in your body as well.
Correct.
And as this stuff starts transpiring, this impacts your overall health. This is why it's mental and physical health.
Absolutely.
And it affects our sleep. You can be ideally thinking you're ready for bed, and then you get into bed and you're like, I'm exhausted. I feel the physical exhaustion. And then as soon as you close your eyes, you're staring at the back of your eyelids.
Exactly.
And then everything lights up in your brain to think about and over, review. And okay, so what that I hear or I see happening is, what can I control tomorrow that has yet to happen
Right.
that I can work through tonight prior to going to
Right,
sleep, which is
right.
all false. None of that is happening.
That's
You're not
right.
solving any problems. You're just keeping your brain awake.
Worried about fear. Fear is false evidence appearing real. It hasn't happened yet, and yet we're worked up about it. I would always challenge people in the anxiety that they're feeling. Let's go back in your life. How many times of all the things that you're worried about, how many times has it ever come true that it's really at the level you put it at, right? It's
Correct.
so rare. Of this giant spectrum of things that can go wrong and that you worry about, it's a fraction. The impact is so minuscule. And yet we work our way into that, right? It's terrible.
It's the perceived idea,
It is.
of the bottom falling out from under you.
It's that, absolutely. Somebody's going to take something that you have that's vital, really vital, right? We know that I have clients, bless their hearts, who've been homeless. That's vital, right? And
absolutely.
That's a sense that they, that's a sense in their life that is almost incomprehensible. So I don't even have a place to lay my head. Well, that's serious.
Yeah, that's pretty significant.
That's just an example. But we have people that worry, did I put enough postage on the stamp? Oh my gosh, I don't know.
Right. When you start having stomach aches and you're like, I normally have a really full functioning system. I don't know what's
Absolutely.
going on. Yes, perhaps now that's another thing you're trying to control is your digestion.
Well, but you know what? Mind, body, and soul. It all
Absolutely.
takes together. And when I was talking about sympathetic, parasympathetic, you can work yourself up into such a state that your gut, the gut function, peristalsis, it's altered. You become constipated. You get diarrhea. You get stomach aches. You get gas and bloating. There's some very strange signs and symptoms: rashes, itching, headaches. So let's look at the gym experience. You come to the gym, and as you work out, you raise your sympathetic level. You're more aggressive. You're breathing hard. Your heart rate goes up, respiration. But you need to have the ability to dial that back down so you can go home and rest and recover. Well, when you work yourself into such a state, you are running at, 1,000 RPM when you should be ticking around 50. And that just does not give you a chance to slow down. And as you say, close my eyes and everything go away for a while.
Yeah.
Nope. You're replaying things in your head. Oh, did I get this done? Did I get this done? What do I tell you to do? Write things down, right? If you can write it down, you can swipe it out of your head, and that's over there. And if you should pop awake, reach over there and write it down.
Seems simple enough like that, Dr.
I know.
Caldwell, but it really isn't.
It's
and
tricky.
That's the challenge
This is
of the
tricky.
controlled mindset.
It's tricky.
And that's those are a lot of the physical parts. But now if we were to look at the emotional side.
Yeah, well, the emotional side, look, that's rough because when you get ratcheted up, you're not yourself, right? You're going to start snapping at people, being short. You're just not the person you would like to be. But now you become the person that nobody wants to be around either.
Right, because you don't have the ability to that regulation of your, normally I wouldn't snap about this, and I seem to be a little bit more bitey than I'm used to, than I am. And then that actually spirals us sometimes into negative self thoughts around like, why am I being this way? And then what more can I control not to be this way?
But yeah, right. You make it worse by thinking about it. You're overthinking most of the stuff. But the other is it can affect you negatively, like your impulsivity. You start to become more impulsive in your decision making, more impulsive in your speech. You can say things that lash out, and that you didn't mean that. Normally, you wouldn't mean that, but you're not your chill self. Something's going on, right?
So the importance of recognizing that within ourselves and humbly recognize it. And what I mean by that is just to not overanalyze yourself or overthink it, or just say, okay, so I see this is happening. Maybe I should take some time and kind of figure out what's going on there. Because if we can take a step back and evaluate how we're handling our need for control, that gives us a lot more tools to then address it.
And that's what we need really is tools. So to recognize and to address it with some type of tool. So let's talk about what it's like when we losing control. Okay, so an event has happened or a situation has you've come into a situation or it's been thrust upon you and you're beginning to lose control. Now, we mentioned earlier how that lack of control can really feel like it jeopardizes your security and safety. Why is it so imperative that we feel like we have to control every single element? Why can't we recognize it for what it is? Why can't we accept what it is and move on? What do you think is going on there?
Well, it is the perceived thought of loss of control. So it triggers this primal survival instinct in us. It's like our brains are wired to think that if we're not in control, something bad could happen, something unpredictable. So that idea of mind reading, that we believe or perceive what we have, which we do not. Because the problem is we can't control every single thing in our lives. And it stresses us out trying to, right? We become so overwhelmed by it.
Nor should we, right? We have enough responsibilities than try to think we can control the weather. And we just can't. You and I are both God-fearing people. We put it in God's hands when we just can't handle it. But quite frankly, that isn't a cop-out. We realize there are some things we can control and some things we can't, right?
And understanding that over-controlled thought that you're, reproducing 2.5 seconds in your head over and over.
Right.
You're just building anxiety. You're building being overwhelmed.
Right.
And it's like, and it's one of those things where you might be listening right now. I know I do this to myself, and I was like, I understand, but be gracious, be a little kind to yourself here. This is just about acknowledging that and being have some self-compassion awareness.
And recognizing it in others, right? So I had a discussion with somebody and we were talking about some different elements in their life. And I said, well, this could be a concern. And it turned into, this is horrible. It's not horrible. It's just, you're using vernacular I don't care to use, but I don't jump there yet. The one thing I wanted to point out, Liz, is I was raised around large animals, horses and buffalo. People who are cowboys, real cowboys, they understand that our life is like riding a horse and the control of the reins. The people who ride horses a lot will realize that the harder I think I can control this animal with the reins in my hand and squeezing with my legs, the less that animal trusts me, right? That animal can feel me on his back. Every time I relax my legs and relax the reins, the horse knows, fine. It only takes a little pressure for me to direct that horse. And the longer you spend with the horse, the more you trust, the more you understand one another. Well, that's what life is like. You can pull on it and pull on it and pull on it, and you're not going to get it to move. If you're in the wrong frame of mind, you really have no control. And beyond that, it's not an issue that involves you, right? You're trying to control things that are 3 steps down the road. Don't, right? Now, I don't mean to be flippant about something like that, but don't sweat the small stuff. And rule number 2 is everything small stuff. That isn't easy to grasp onto you when you're in the throes of just, your mind is blown up because things seem like they're going so wrong. But that's part of the understanding and recognizing I'm in a kind of a bad place. Let's reassess. That gives us a chance to, let's really look at the problem and fix it. Hopefully you're doing it with somebody else too. Another pair of eyes always helps.
So another layer to what you're sharing right there is our identity is often tied to our ability to control things. And that's probably from the creation of your little beings, of starting from adolescent all the way up to wherever you're at in your life right now. And being so, we feel like we're on top of our own lives, where that's in our careers, our relationships, it's in our health. Like I know exactly what's going on.
Everything's going our way.
Yeah. But when we lose that control, it can feel like a threat to who we are as a person. And that's when we really get thrown off emotionally, and we're not sure how to manage that.
You're right. But you know what? There are some things that just are unforeseen. And that is tragedy, loss of life, car accidents. Liz, you and I have common friends, common training associates and clients that their lives changed in an instant.
Split second.
Loss of loved ones, impacted their health majorly. This isn't minor. This is major. Surgeries. It's incredible. But is it really worth trying to dwell on all the things I can't predict? It's typically not. And what we need to do is we need to understand that we've lost, not a filter, but we've lost the ability to objectively look at it and decide, well, I really couldn't control that. Bible tells us that there's only one thing we can control. That's ourselves.
Absolutely.
So when these things come upon us, we need to take upon ourselves to objectively look, well, is it as bad as they say it is? Are there alternatives? Sure there are. Sit and think. Ask somebody older. Ask for the wisdoms of your elders and loved ones, one you can trust, right? You don't want to turn to people who they live their life in chaos. You want to learn to the people who've been to it before. I would say as business owners and people who they have either family and loved ones depending on them, or they have employees or shareholders or whatever, there's a great deal of stress put upon them. But the objectivity is where it's missing, and that is slow down, reassess, what do we do from this? Or where do we go from here? What we need to do then is to just find out what it is we can really trust as being accurate information, and what we can trust is I can't control that anyway, but I'm going to do my very best to adapt to the situation and survive.
Right. And it seems that matter of fact in how you shared that, Dr. Caldwell. In sharing a very life-changing, unpredictable event in my life was when I was 23 years old, and I spoke to my mom about every other day about just life, just normal stuff in life. And one evening she called and I wasn't home, and I'm like, I'll call her back tomorrow. And tomorrow never came.
Yeah.
She walked out of work and had some sort of a physical, attack that they thought was a stroke, which later we discovered was a brain aneurysm.
Right.
And she was taken. And after that, there is no bounce back. The loss of control there is so unimaginable. And I lost everything. And having to rediscover or begin to discover who I was without my mother, there's no control there, is just, again, unimaginable.
Yeah.
And when we talk about that, I don't want to be so flippant.
I won't. Believe me, I don't mean it to be like that. Our worlds were different, and I come from an all-male military background. I smile when I say that. People think I've been this tortured animal my whole life. No.
No, not at all.
I have a very loving family, but there was a great deal of structure. And yours was, you had responsibilities very early in life.
Absolutely.
And then as your mother passed away, they were all thrust upon you.
Right.
And that was not the case in mine. I've always been a part of something bigger than me, and that was my military and military life. But in that is, we're not allowed to wallow very long.
You have to learn to take what you had in the time that you were given with those individuals in your life.
Sure.
Because I had to utilize whatever resources and traits that she provided me in becoming a mother, becoming a wife, doing all. She passed away 3 months after I had married. And so that was a quick trying to adjust and get into all of those next stages of life without a significant person in my life. But one of the things that I definitely leaned on is everything she taught me about being a person. Oh, significantly. Now, to be honest, that's a whole other conversation.
It is.
Some other time, because I stepped away from my faith because I was very angry with God for that. So don't want to get too off topic, but we will definitely
absolutely
cover that,
will.
On another.
That's another thing. But, Liz, let's then talk about the strategies.
Okay.
Let's talk about here we are, we recognize how we have, now how do I come back? Let's form a plan.
Well, and the biggest thing is what I was sharing earlier, I kind of modeled is when I was in the bowling alley, awareness. Like I was aware something was going on within me. I was kind of like, what's going on within me? Like I had to do some self-compassion there of not being overly critical.
If I was there, Liz, and I saw you going through that, I'd go like, what's going on, Liz? Why are you being such a goober? Because I'm her friend. Right?
Right. And by the way, we don't necessarily love being called out when we're feeling kind of weird.
No, we don't. We
so
do
that's
not.
helpful.
We do not. Nobody wants to be spotlighted.
Right. But when we can learn to recognize that we're I apologize. We are trying too hard to control things.
Yeah.
We are, trying to manage whatever it is that's happening. We become a lot more anxious and we're getting frustrated and things aren't going according to plan. Take a moment. Pause. It's okay. Like figure out what's kind of going on, being able to be like, and everyone always believes like, oh my gosh, I have to be on point every second and every minute of every moment. And it's like, no, take a minute, take a breath. Like what's going on? Because one of the things that I talk a lot in my role in psychotherapy is around like negative cognitions, which is like negative thoughts, like it's a big word. We go to a catastrophic state of mind.
Yeah.
Like worst case scenario. Like if, for instance, like you were talking about the postage, if that letter doesn't get there, the world will end. Okay, maybe not so much.
Yeah.
Or where we are generalizing, overgeneralizing a situation. We're jumping to conclusions. We are trying to do mind reading of whatever we believe the other person involved at the workplace is thinking of us.
Yes.
You know, all of these things, like we're just laying
Yes.
there ruminating at all of these distortions that it just is such an impairment. And the biggest part of that is identifying what each one of those things are and then addressing them.
Yeah.
And you have to have some beyond awareness. I mean, I dare say gumption, but of like, why do I care that much? And I don't mean to be unkind in that.
No.
But why am if I give my 100% best and I'm completely authentic in who I am and my delivery and whatever it is that I'm giving, whether it be a conversation or a workplace interaction, that's all I can give. At the end of the day, overthinking how I could have said it differently gets me nowhere.
That's right.
So you have to create and construct that kind of cognitive thought process,
That's
just so
right,
you know,
yeah.
because that's not something that's built in. So we're talking about making that a new neurological feedback. So you're able to move into that kind of
Excellent.
thinking pattern
Excellent.
versus the negative one of worst case scenario, you know, tomorrow
Excellent.
the world ends because I brought the wrong coffee.
Love all that. And let's just look back a little bit on a comparison to how Liz, her approach and her profession. Mine always sounds like this stereotypical coach speech. Come on, boy, rub some dirt in it and get back in the game. The whole point is mine was thrust upon me. This is the way you dig yourself out of a hole. You stop digging, first of all, and do all you can to keep going.
I
Now,
like that. Yeah.
yours is helping people recognize you're in a hole, stop digging. And now here's some tools. I appreciate that. And I want people who are listening and watching to understand that we are not in conflict in our ideas. Mine comes from a different approach. That's what's nice about what we do when we talk, Liz, is that I get to give male perspective. I get to give competitive athlete perspective. I get to give business ownership perspective, as do you. But on a female side, as a professional psychotherapist, somebody who helps people develop plans for when they're not exactly in the right place and they don't know who to turn to.
Sure.
So I think that's extremely valuable. But more importantly is we need to all have the ability to look at something and go, is it really worth all the stress? If all these things that seem to be going wrong, can I sit down in a quiet spot and go, now wait a minute, I'm worried about people liking me? Does it matter? I'm worried about my assessment, my review, what their opinion is. Does that really matter?
Well, and when you say that, I think it's important to talk about what I was sharing earlier. If you are putting 100% of your most authentic, best work and your foot forward, then that's where you have that reflection of, you know, I did give all here. Now, if you're giving 10% and say, does it matter? Yeah, it should matter, because
Exactly.
you should have some more, you know, that work ethic piece, where whatever it may be. However, if you're truly putting all of yourself into something, that's where it ends. Don't give all of yourself in this other thought process of, well, if I overthink it 10 different ways, it's going to really work out differently.
Yeah, and you know, I'm going to piggyback on that just a few minutes, and that is, I frequently ask people when they say, well, I'm doing everything I can, just every single moment I'm this, really, let's take a look. How are you spending your day? Well, I stay up till midnight and I wake up around 10 and then I play video games. Okay, so let's reassess, right? We have some quotes that we both love. Don't feel disappointed when you didn't get the results from the work you didn't do. And one of my favorite ones is, if you were the boss and you were the company,
I've heard this 1,000
would you
times.
hire you?
Right.
Probably not. So this
If
is
you're not giving your
right. So this is the coach speech, right? This is what you put up on the daily quote. And everything. Well, it is. It is smart.
Okay, calm down there, ego.
And you need to do that for yourself. No, I'm kidding. But
Absolutely.
the idea is, that's the recognition, and that is assess yourself And as I said, we're never alone. Find people who can help.
100%. Another area of this, and this has been a very hot topic in our society right now, so I want to make sure that I put some real clear understandings around boundaries. So boundaries in this case, we're talking about with yourself and others. For example, instead of trying to control every little detail or situation, we can focus on what we actually can control, like our responses and our actions. An example here is I find this quite frequently in any type of interactions when there is two individuals and now another individual is responding, the other person is thinking, why are you saying that? Why are you doing that? Like, you should just do this. And why don't you do it this way? Because this would, and this is what's going on in the other person's internal dialogue. And it's making them very dysregulated inside because this other person is, by the way, being their own person and not you. And your expectations that they're going to respond and engage the way you do is false. And you're creating such a state for yourself. It's kind of like the old...
This is the backseat driver.
Well, that, but it's also the, the older couple where it's like, Tom, stop doing that, where they're trying to redirect their behavior because it's making them uncomfortable versus you can't control how someone else responds and acts. That's why it's important for you to identify you can only respond and hold yourself accountable to your own actions. And so that's why it's important to have those boundaries around your responses to this. It's about letting go of what you can't control and focusing what you have power over. And that being the case of what I'm dictating there is, or sharing, I shouldn't say dictating, but that when you see someone else responding or doing something, this happens in entertainment, in shows. I was just sharing with you that I was watching something that it was agitating me. I was like, why would you do that? And I'm like, why do I care? Like, I'm like, why am I getting all wound up about something that's a stupid fictional interaction? And then it's like understanding like, well, that's because I wouldn't respond that way. Okay.
So in our little mental experiment, the first thing I asked you was, why did that upset you? Right? We want to explore this.
I said, because she's weak.
And I said, it upset you because that's exactly what the person who wrote her character was supposed to do, is upset a person like you. So this,
well done.
Yeah, exactly. I watched shows like that where I actually hated the character, but I realized to myself, wow, somebody did a really good job because I hated that person. Okay, she's an actor. This isn't real. What? But
it is. How many times have you been in a situation you saw someone respond or do something and you're like, why would you do it that way? Because they don't do it your way.
And then you may even catch the criticism, later on, either this really left-handed compliment or maybe somebody who's really trying to get under your skin and goes, well, that's not how I would have done it. But you need to take power over that and go, next time you can do it that way.
Absolutely.
And move on.
When people put their expectations on you and how you should respond to something, and you're like, hey, I'm just me. Like, at the end of the day, this is how I'm going to respond. This is how I'm going to be. And I see that you would have done it differently, but that's not the way I'm doing it.
Well, that's the tools. Those are the tools. And the more experience you have, the more time in the trenches, sometimes the rougher the experience, the better you're going to be at it. We talked about, I made an example to you one time about people in the workplace. And you always have these one or two people who they just demand that I be paid as much as this person, like you said. I've been here as long as him. Why does he get? Well, it's because that person answers the phone when I call. That person will always do overtime. That person puts forth more. They deserve that. You haven't proven yourself. And then when I ask, you say no. So those are issues where you're falsely equivocating yourself to somebody who's better than you. That opportunity is one where you then make an assessment. Okay, I need to do what he does. I'm going to use him as an example. I'm going to follow what he does. I'll ask questions. Let him become the mentor.
So when we go into strategies, what do you think one last most important strategy might be?
Most of it, Liz, is you have a word, giving yourself grace. Mine is very much that, and it falls to this self-compassion, but it's also this self-deprecation too, right? Is let's say you've tried, you really tried to do a good job, but you kind of fell on your face. But you need to look back and go, wow, I'm going to laugh about this later. A quick story. I gave this it was kind of a important speech. It was an important speech. And I had a lot of my colleagues there. I bought a new suit, the whole bit. I gave a whole thing at the lectern, looked really good. And then I realized about 2/3 through the presentation that me wearing my new suit, the label to my suit was still on my, so
Forearm.
rather than shrink from it, I go, oh, and I tore it off and everybody laughed. And then I realized, okay, it's not a big deal.
Beautiful.
It's happened to everybody, right? This is part of the tool. These are part of the tools. This is, okay, I didn't do so well.
Right.
Next time I will. Next time.
Gentle, absolutely.
Be kind to yourself. We don't know
Notorious
everything.
for
We're
being
never
cruel.
going to. So just do the best you can.
Absolutely. And I want to also talk about one last thing, and that would be grounding techniques. Those are really popular, again, right now, and understanding what grounding techniques mean. It's when we start becoming overwhelmed, how we calm ourselves down, how we tap into who we are and really regulate our system, our breathing, our mindset, the racing thoughts, the racing heart rate, all perspiring, all the things that's happening. It's practicing, whether a lot of people are a little away from this, but deep breathing and mindfulness and meditation, because if you train your brain to calm down, there are scientific proven studies everywhere that you can regulate your system. You have to do it.
Top tier military are taught how to bring it down, calm down. You need to calm down. If you do any work in the water and you are a part of an emergency response team, you're in an environment where your panic will cost you your life. If you're in a firefight, you can't hit a target if you're all over the place. And if he's firing at you, you better simmer the hell down, because these are proven skills, right?
Yes.
Scientifically proven, but in the field proven. Slow down, assess what's good, what's bad. Here's where we go from there.
Right. And in that, you're practicing those breathing pieces around what are you saying to yourself while you're trying to get
What are
your
you saying to
regulation.
yourself?
That is huge. And that's that meditative state and knowing how to touch base with yourself.
And when you say meditation, not in the woo-woo everybody does, sits cross-legged on a mat.
That's for some.
Okay.
Not for all.
Okay, let's take a long deep breath in. Let's give a really long slow exhale. Let's bring it on down. By the way, that lowers blood pressure all the time. And when that happens, your physiologic responses can change, and now you're going to ask yourself, where am I? What needs to be done? And that's how we're going to do that. I love that. I love all.
It's just understanding the importance of there's all types of different techniques out there. And a lot of the things we've talked about today regarding cognitive distortion and grounding techniques will be attached to our show notes.
Love it.
So you'll have some, tools that you can actually look at and review afterwards a little bit more in detail of what we're talking about today.
Yeah, I love it. We've covered pretty much everything. And I like how this went. I want people to always understand, most importantly, is we do not, I call it an illusion, we do not have control over everything you think you have control over. Now, not to freak people out, is do the best you can and what you know, be on guard. Those things that come in, you handle. This is like driving your car in inclement weather. It's starting to snow, it's starting to blow, I'm losing visibility. Okay, slow down, turn on your wipers, call ahead. What's it like? Should I turn around? Making those assessments. But also, I can't control the weather. And maybe I need to do this another time. Maybe I'm not prepared for this trip right now. Maybe. That's the whole point, is we don't know. But try to just understand. You can't control everything. And there are things you can control. And what you can't control, be your level-headed best to keep that under control.
Learn how to be level-headed.
Right.
And reality is, you don't want to have to control everything. That sounds miserable.
That's right.
The idea that I would have to control everything is exhausting. Making sure that you're really trying to, again, be kind to yourself and identify what's going on and learn that I do not have control over all of this, and that's okay.
And life is absolutely unpredictable, yes?
Yes.
Yeah.
That is the great thing about life. It's so unpredictable. As much as we try and control things, the more we try and control them, the more out of control they get. I was sharing with you earlier that with the racing mind mentality, when an individual gets fixated on a concern and a worry, And then they start trying to manage how to address this fear, this uncertainty, this concern. And they're building up ways, well, I bet if I could do this, and then I could do this, and I can do this. And the whole thing that this is transpiring in the body and is more and more stress and more. But in your mind, you're perceiving, I'm releasing my anxiety by overthinking the problem.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, it's actually the counter of that.
Yeah.
And understanding how quickly we fall into those patterns and learning to identify those things. So life is unpredictable. You're never going to know what comes next. And it doesn't mean that you're powerless.
Yeah.
It just means that you have to adjust and learn how to respond. And remember that when things start to feel out of control, that it's okay. You have to take a minute. You know, the pause and recalibrate self. I wish we utilize that more often, especially on social media. But if we could just take a minute, recollect ourselves. But there's such a push of, again, quick to respond, quick to do something. You are in control of how you quickly respond to anything. They can wait.
Yeah. You know what, Liz, now that you mentioned that, this the impulsivity, this quick to react thing, no. The very best at people who are good in not just linguistics, but communication is when things like that happen, stop and then proceed. Slow everything down. Take a look. This was a great topic, Liz. This was one that was, I'm glad we did. I hope that the viewers and the listeners got a chance to listen in. And we always invite people to look, listen, join, comment, please share. It's how our podcast is going to grow. We're about midway. We're a little past midway to where our initial goals are for our podcast in Anchored in Chaos. We're looking now to expand into Patreon, and we're going to continue to push. We're now into our second season.
Ish.
And now we're going to start, now that we've kind of broken the ice, Liz and I are determined now to put our names out there a little bit more and do all the hard work we possibly can. But we need to hear from you.
Sure.
We love your comments. We're on all the platforms.
I can hardly wait to do public speaking. Just bursting at seams to do that.
Oh, Liz.
But real quick, I do want to add a little plug to our Patreon. We just started that.
Yeah.
So within the Patreon community, we are hoping that listeners and followers would love to go on and become agents of chaos.
Yeah.
That is,
My son will love that name.
yes, that is a little, opportunity for our listeners to kind of get bonus material, behind the scenes looks of what we do, and just a little bit more insight as well. There is also an opportunity for our Agents of Chaos members to have some live Q&A with Dr. Caldwell and I on questions, ideas, insight, anything of that nature. And it's pretty simple. It's like $5 a month.
Yep.
So
Yep.
pretty
We're gonna
easy to do.
Free trial too, right?
Free 7-day trial to kind of get
That's
all
right,
the extras in to see what it looks like before you fully commit to the process. But our goal is to get support for the podcast.
It is.
Doesn't run on its own. I can guarantee that.
Yeah,
And
this is
the more
it's more expensive than people realize.
Sure.
The people on the production side, Brian and the people he worked with, they're amazing. But we're not as fumbling as we were, and we're more focused on what we're doing, but we still enjoy it. And I know Liz and I have talked about this in the past. We're not in this to make money. We really want to serve others. But if this could pay for itself,
that is
beautiful.
That is the prayer for me.
That is absolutely prayer.
We definitely want to continue to reach out and touch people's lives and be an encourager if possible, and just give everyone some helpful thoughts if possible.
Yeah, that's true.
Go from there, I guess.
And look for me over on the Genuine Effort LLC. I'm on all the platforms too. So Liz and I are trying to work all this stuff out where we have remotes. Visit us on both. You can comment and question us on both. But we'll probably set a Patreon thing up there at some point. But that has to do with training. And Liz knows I believe that gyms are churches and that we have a chance to share our fellowship. But not only that, it's just wisdom and encouragement through our lives. That's where all this coaching stuff comes from. I've been doing it for almost 40 years and I love it. That's what makes our mix so tangible to me, is that we get a chance to reach out to people who are in need of help, and that's all we really want to do.
And everyone, please wish Dr. Caldwell a very happy birthday today. It is his birthday.
I'm
so
21.
What he wants to do for his birthday is record on the podcast.
I can drink a beer now.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. See you later.
This show is part of the ICT Podcast Network. For more information, visit ictpod.net.